We're very fortunate to have at the image or so a very dynamic duo seated to my right. And just 2 weeks, as I said, we did the Chinese railroad workers and their settlement in Canada. And we featured Dora and Nipp at the end of the table here, who is our CEO. And she was very much a big part of the program in that presentation. And this evening, we have her husband, Lorne Foster. I see you're a dynamic duo. Just a secret. Family business.
Everybody wonders how she got a husband this handsome.
Modesty's not one of his virtues.
I didn't know for sure we were husband and wife. John's written a book called Writing Justice, and we're going to be celebrating, it's going to be part of our celebration of our ethnic and immigration writing series, which we're planning to do again, and this is the launch of it. And so I'm going to ask Dora to speak on that program and also to introduce Lorne. I think she can do that very well. And then Lorne will speak to you about the book and the purpose of it and so on. And Winston and Louis will wrap up the evening's activities. So we're very happy to see you all here to participate. As always, we always have a good program lined up. Very interesting, fascinating subjects, and the very people who are involved in creating the activity are here to speak for themselves. So, Dora, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, good evening everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I have the privilege of introducing to you background to our Ethnocultural Voices series, and we've chosen Writing Justice, the revival of that program. Now, the Ethnocultural Voices series was the successor to the original Studies in Ethnic and Immigration History. I'm looking at these notes like this because Carl Forde typed them up for me. And from that, we have a number of very well-recognized and well-respected publications. Professor Marnie's Gathering Place, Peoples and Neighborhoods of Toronto, Dr. Lillian Petrov's The Macedonian Community in Toronto, and Professor Frank Storino's Forging the Chain, Italian Migration in North America. Our Ethnocultural Voices series also includes Picture Brides, Japanese Women in Canada, as well as Unhappy Rebel, the life and story of Andy Strudek, a Slovenian immigrant in the 1920s. Elizabeth McLuhan's Safe Havens, a story of 5 refugee families. The series represents the experiences of individual immigrants as well as members of ethnic groups, speaks of their anxieties, their achievements, their hopes, and the challenges as well. And we've seen the revival of these series, say, through this publication, and also through the Encyclopedia of Canada's Peoples, which is available on the web. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book before I introduce Lorne. The Writing Justice, it really is the product of a lot of love and a lot of support of family. My cousin Paul Best did the illustrations. Carolyn Rodlick edited. Linda Stanley is a volunteer, and one of my relatives from like 400 years ago, we were able to trace it back, was responsible for coordinating all of this. Carl Forde, Jean Forde, so many people worked on this book, and they gave their time and effort, and we certainly appreciate it. So, the person who's responsible for this book is Lorne Foster, my hubby. Lorne's originally for those who don't know, he's originally from Chatham, and I was able to trace his family back to about the 1600s, and we're able to do a line where his ancestors came to the Underground Railway, ended up in the Delaware Delta area, and so he's a product of African slaves, First Nations, as well as Pennsylvania Dutch, and there's British thrown in there as well. his family crossed over into the Windsor area in the late 1700s. It's an incredible family tree. Lorne is currently a professor at York University. He's the director of the MPAL, which he never says the full title, but it's the Masters in Public Administration and Law. So, yeah, does anybody else want to know anything else about me?
I'll just finish that genealogy a little bit that she said about me coming from the Delaware. And now that she's done all this research, there's a few family members that have decided that they're going to go for Aboriginal status now. They've got the evidence, so they're going to go for it. Well, first of all, I want to start off just thanking everybody for coming tonight. I am really happy to see actually friends and family and interested others here tonight. And I want to thank you and tell you that I am very touched that you could come out on an evening where the traffic is kind of horrendous. Our mayor hasn't put in the subways yet, so we still have to suffer until Mayor Forde completes that project. And secondly, I want to thank the Multicultural History Society and all the people that Dora had mentioned, beginning with Jean Forde and Carl Thorpe and Carolyn Bromley and Britt Braddon and Winston Louis and the others who work here, Julie Lam, etc. I am actually equally touched by their work ethic and expertise. They are real doers. I mean, they don't ask if it can be done. They figure out how it can be done and get it done. I am blessed to have those kinds of people who help me with this finished product here today. And I guess next I should really thank and take time to note that this effort is equally influenced by Share newspaper. Actually, Share is billed as Canada's largest ethnic newspaper, which is true, but it actually is more than that. It is really a Pan-African force. It has Pan-African contributors and a Pan-African audience. I was always amazed by letters coming from Africa about articles that I had written, and even if it was con, you know, whether it was pro or con, I actually really was touched by people writing about a particular issue. There was a lot of people who didn't like the articles, but again, I appreciated the effort. They would come from the Caribbean, they would come from Africa, and of course, the paper itself is made up of Caribbean and African contributors and so forth. And in that sense, it was more than simply Canada's largest ethnic newspaper. Now, I thought about my history at Share. And a story that I really haven't told anybody is how I come to start writing articles for Share. I actually was quite a regular contributor for about 8 years. And this book, as I think that we mentioned, is a compilation of that 8 to 10 year period when I was writing for Share in the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. And actually what happened was, I wanted to write an article on Black History Month, or an article for Black History Month on Black history, because I thought it was very important. The people that I spoke to, they only knew that Matthew da Costa came in 1603. You know, that was the extent of their knowledge about Black history in Canada, and I felt I could contribute to that, and I was very adamant about writing an article for it and making and educating everybody. And I sent it in. And I heard nothing for a few days, and then I decided, well, you know, I'm not going to let them get away with that. I went down there, and still nothing happened. And I said, okay, well, maybe it wasn't as good as I thought. And then I sort of left it alone. And lo and behold, about a year and a half later, I get a call on a Friday night from a man named Arnold August, who I kind of vaguely was familiar with the name. And he says, you know, I own the newspaper Share. And he says that I was just going through the files here, and I come across an article with your name on it. I really like it. I said, what article are you talking about? Because I actually didn't connect it to a year and a half ago, writing a piece of Black History. But he refreshed my memory. And we actually talked for about 2.5 hours that Friday night. Just talking. I found out that we had a lot of ideas in common. And we had a real sense of the necessity of solutions. We didn't always agree on what should be done to resolve problems in the Black community, but we're always directing our conversation towards a sort of public policy approach. And as you were told, I know I'm in public policy at York University and the Equity Studies Department too. So at the end of our conversation, Arnold August, who's the publisher, he said, you know, I would like to publish you. And I says, well, you know, that article's a year and a half old. You can publish it if you want, you know. And he said, no, you don't understand. He says, I want you to write some articles for me and send them in whenever you want. You know. I said, well, that sounds pretty cool. He says, you can just start writing. And I said, well, what do you mean? Once a week? Once, you know, twice a week? Whatever you want. So I started that way, and I sort of accelerated over the years because I got more and more into it. I think I was writing probably sometimes 2 or 3 times a month in the newspaper. It was a weekly newspaper before. I would be contributing to Share. And as I said, this is